Hey Divash, you look worried. What's the matter?
Hello, teacher. I've got a new family member.
That's good news. Congratulations. Did you get a brother or a sister?
Thank you. Actually, it's my cousin. But I heard that he has a heart defect.
Hang on, what kind of defect?
The doctor said it's a septal defect, which means there is a hole in his heart.
Ah, yes, this is a condition in which there is a hole in the septum of the heart. Due to the hole, the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood get mixed up and less oxygen is transported to the cells.
That is really bad, isn't it?
Don't worry, these kinds of defects are the most common heart problems in newborns.
So, can it be treated?
Of course, in some cases the hole closes itself with time, but if it doesn't, then surgery is required to close the hole to prevent further complications.
So, everything gets back to normal over time.
Indeed, but regular checkups are necessary to monitor the activity of the heart.
That's a relief, teacher. Can we study about the heart today? I want to know more about it.
Sure, we shall study about the mammalian heart then. Should we start with what you know about the heart?
Yes, I will explain it with the help of a diagram of the human heart. The major parts of the heart are atria, ventricles, pulmonary arteries, pulmonary veins, coronary arteries, vena cava, and aorta. The aorta is the large arching blood vessel with branches supplying blood upwards to the head and downwards to the rest of the body. The other blood vessel leaving the heart is the pulmonary artery. This branches very quickly after leaving the heart into the left and right pulmonary arteries, taking blood to the left and right lungs. Additionally, on the right hand side of the heart, there are two large veins. One runs vertically downwards and other vertically upwards. The vein which brings blood from the head is called the superior vena cava, while the one that brings blood from the rest of the body is called the inferior vena cava. Likewise, the left pulmonary vein and the right pulmonary vein bring the blood back to the heart from the left and right lungs. They are the only veins that carry oxygenated blood. On the surface of the heart, the coronary arteries can be seen. These branch from the aorta and deliver oxygenated blood to the walls of the heart itself.
Great! Do you know that a human heart has a mass of around 300 grams and is about the size of the fist?
Wow, that's quite big. Is the heart also made up of similar kinds of muscles as blood vessels?
Actually not. The heart is made up of a special kind of muscle known as cardiac muscle.
Oops, how can I forget that? I know that cardiac muscles are only found in the heart.
Indeed, the cell surface membranes of cardiac muscle cells are very tightly joined together. This close contact between the muscle cells allows waves of electrical excitation to pass easily between them, which is a very important feature of the cardiac muscles.
Why is that feature so important?
We will learn about that later in this lesson. For the moment, let's learn about the internal structure of the heart. Can you explain what you remember?
I'd love to. If the heart is cut open vertically, the four chambers can be seen. The two chambers on the left of the heart are completely separated from the two chambers on the right by a wall of muscle called the septum. Additionally, blood cannot pass through the septum. However, if it does, then the condition is called a septal defect. So the only way of returning blood to the heart is either from the lungs or from different body parts. The upper chamber on each side of the heart is called an atrium, or sometimes an auricle. The two atria receive blood from the veins. The blood from the vena cava flows into the right atrium, while the blood from the pulmonary veins flows into the left atrium. The lower chambers are called the ventricles. Blood flows from the left atrium into the left ventricle, and from the right atrium to the right ventricle. The blood is then squeezed from the right ventricle to the pulmonary arteries and from the left ventricle to the aorta. The valves present between the ventricles and arteries are called semilunar valves or SL valves. The atria and ventricles also have valves between them, which are known as the atrioventricular valves or AV valves. The one on the left is the mitral or bicuspid valve, and the one on the right is the tricuspid valve.
Wonderful! I see that you've revised very well.
Thank you, teacher.
Do you know the walls of the ventricles are much thicker than those of the atria?
Wait, they are?
Yes. Don't you recall that the ventricles need to develop much more force when they contract to push the blood out of the heart and around the body? But the atria only need to push the blood to the ventricles. Also, the wall of the right ventricle is thinner than that of the left because the force produced is relatively small for the blood to get to the lungs, which are very close to the heart.
Yes, now I remember that. But teacher, I wonder what happens if blood flows to the lungs with high pressure?
Well, if blood with high pressure travels to the lungs, the tissue fluid would accumulate in the lungs, thus hampering the gas exchange.
Ah, I see. And the left ventricle has to develop sufficient force to supply blood to the rest of the body organs, except the lungs, right?
Indeed, the left ventricle must also be able to develop enough force to ensure that there is sufficient blood reaching organs like the brain and the kidneys to maintain their continuous function.
Ah, I get it now.
Since you're a hard-working student, I will reward you for that.
Wow, what do I get, teacher?
You get to solve this quiz. Ta-da! Your answer is incorrect. Click here to try again. That's correct. Click here to continue with the lesson.
That was a pretty easy question.
Yes, you need to understand the structure and function of the heart to answer that.
Yep. I wonder how all those components of the heart work together.
Don't worry, I'm here to explain. Our heart beats around 70 times per minute. The sequence of events leading to one heartbeat is called a cardiac cycle.
That's quite fast.
Indeed, this cardiac cycle comprises mainly 3 stages, namely atrial systole, ventricular systole, and ventricular diastole.
Whoa, those are pretty big words.
There, don't worry. Once you know the mechanism, they're not so hard. Have a look here. When the blood from the pulmonary veins and the vena cava enters the atria, both atria contract. This condition is called atrial systole. During the atrial systole, the pressure of the blood is higher in the atrium than in the ventricle, which forces the AV valve to open, pushing the blood into ventricles. About 0.1 seconds after the atria contract, the thick muscular walls of the ventricles squeeze inwards and increase the blood pressure. This is called a ventricular systole. As the pressure in the ventricles becomes greater than the pressure in the atria, the AV valve shut, preventing the backflow of the blood into the atria. Instead, the blood rushes upwards into the aorta and the pulmonary arteries, pushing open the SL valves in these vessels, letting the blood out of the heart. The ventricular systole lasts for about 0.3 seconds. Finally, the ventricles relax, and this stage is called the ventricular diastole. In this stage, the pressure in the ventricles drops. The SL valves close instantly after their cusps are filled with high-pressure blood to prevent the backflow of the blood into the ventricles. As the whole heart muscles relax, the blood from the veins flows into the 2 atria. In the atria, blood pressure is very low. Even so, the thin walls of the atria get swollen, providing very little resistance to the blood flow. Some of the blood even trickles downwards into the ventricles through the AV valves. This leads to the contraction of atrial muscle, which forcefully pushes the blood down into the ventricles, and the whole cycle repeats.
Wow, this is such a coordinated mechanism. I observed that the valves play a major role in the coordination of the heart.
Indeed, without the valves, it would be really hard for the unidirectional flow of the blood. Here is the graph showing how each valve reacts in the cardiac cycle. Can you explain this?
Sure.
Just to remind you before explaining, contraction increases the pressure and relaxation lowers the pressure. Also take note that AV valves open when atrial pressure is higher and SL valves open when the ventricular pressure is high. And the converse is true for the valves closing.
Noted. Let me share my understanding. Initially, the atria contract, increasing the atrial pressure, which leads to the opening of the AV valve. Then the blood passes through the AV valve to the ventricles, which lowers the atrial pressure and increases ventricle pressure, causing the AV valves to close, as shown in point W. The contraction of the ventricle further increases the ventricular pressure and causes SL valves to open, as shown in point X. At this point, the ventricular pressure is higher than in the aorta, and the pulmonary artery, which allows the blood to pass through them, emptying the ventricles. Then, the ventricular pressure decreases, which leads to closing of the SL valve, as shown in point Y. The further decrease in ventricular pressure leads to the opening of AV valves, as shown in point Z, and the process repeats.
Well explained. Also note that from the point W to X, even though the pressure in the ventricle increases, the volume of the blood stays the same. Similarly, from the point Y to Z, the ventricular pressure is decreasing, but the volume of blood stays constant.
Noted. And all clear.
Good. Then let's check your clarity with the upcoming quiz.
Sure, teacher.
Your answer is incorrect. Click here to try again. That's correct. Click here to continue with the lesson. Was the question hard enough for you?
Well, after all, the question was again about the cardiac cycle that I explained, so it was pretty easy.
So, can you explain the answer?
Of course. At point 1, the AV valve closes. After point 1, the ventricular pressure increases, which means the muscles of the ventricle wall contract. At point 2, the SL valve opens. So, from point 1 to point 2, the volume of the left ventricle remains constant because the blood doesn't leave the ventricle until point 2. The blood flows from the left ventricle into the aorta only after point 2.
That's it. Now, let's learn how the heartbeat is controlled. Do you remember the heart muscle I told you about earlier?
Yes, the cardiac muscle. You said their features are very important.
Indeed, the cardiac muscles are myogenic.
Myogenic? I think I've heard of this term before, but I don't seem to recall. Can you please help?
That's what I'm here for. It means the heart can naturally contract and relax. It doesn't need to receive impulses from the brain for contraction and relaxation.
Whoa! How does that happen?
Well, it has its own mechanism. This mechanism controls the heartbeat by creating the cycles called cardiac cycles.
That's so cool. Can you please explain more?
Definitely. The cardiac cycle is initiated in a specialized patch of muscle in the right atrium wall called the sinoatrial node. It is often called the SAN in short, or pacemaker. The muscle cells of the SAN generate the impulse and set the rhythm for all the other cardiac muscle cells. Its rate can be adjusted by the nerves connecting it with the brain. As the muscle in the SAN contracts, it produces an electrical excitation wave which sweeps through all of the muscle in the whole atria of the heart. This excitation wave makes the muscle in the atrial walls contract simultaneously, and the electrical wave sweeps onwards and reaches another patch of cells called the atrioventricular node, or AVN. The AVN situated in the septum is the only route through which the excitation wave is conducted from the atria to the ventricles. This is because a band of fibers is present between the atria and the ventricles, which does not transmit electrical impulses to the ventricle walls. So, since the AVN is the only route through, the conduction of impulse is delayed for almost 0.1 seconds before it actually travels down to the ventricles. From the AVN, the excitation wave moves down swiftly through the septum of the heart, along the fibers known as Purkinje tissues. Once the excitation wave arrives at the base of the septum, it spreads outwards and upwards through the ventricle walls. These waves in ventricles cause the cardiac muscle in ventricle walls to contract from the bottom towards the top, squeezing the blood upwards and into the arteries. The ventricles then relax. Then the muscle in the SAN contracts again, and the whole cycle repeats.
That's amazing! So, for the transmission of electrical impulses, the cell membranes of the heart muscle cells must be tightly packed.
Exactly.
I completely understand it now. But
Please go ahead.
what if the coordination goes wrong? Can that happen? I mean, what if the waves don't pass through their path and travel everywhere? Is that possible?
Well, in some cases, the excitation wave becomes chaotic, passing through the ventricular muscle in all directions. This process is known as fibrillation. The heart wall simply flutters rather than contracting and relaxing as a whole in this condition.
But what causes fibrillation?
It may be started by an electric shock or by a damage to large areas of muscle in the walls of the heart.
Oh no, that sounds really dangerous.
It actually is. Fibrillation is almost always fatal unless treated immediately.
Teacher, I saw the graphs in the picture earlier. Are those ECG readings?
Correct. Do you know what they mean?
I only know that they help to detect and record the excitation of the waves. But what do they actually represent?
Well, you don't have to know about the ECG in detail, but I can give you a simple explanation.
All right.
At the label O, the wave of excitation sweeps over the atrial wall. Then, at the point P, the atrial walls contract. The parts labeled Q, R and S represent the wave of excitation in the ventricle walls, which leads to ventricular contraction. Finally, the T section indicates the recovery and relaxation of the ventricle walls, after which the cycle repeats.
Whoa, that's a lot to take in. But it's really interesting, as it feels like being a doctor, studying these ECGs and the heart.
Well, if you work hard, you could be one in the future. Oh, and I do understand that there are a lot of new terminologies and concepts in this lesson. I'll recommend you to revise this lesson again if you're still unsure about it.
Sure, teacher. I will revise the lesson again at home to master it.
All right, but before leaving, do finish the end of the lesson quiz.
Okay, teacher.
Register now for free